mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang mag-ibig, pero sa sinangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng bangaw, ay hinagang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal.
front and center the issue of data privacy and protection as personal data becomes a necessary business commodity. But before I get ahead of myself, let me stop here so as not to preempt what promises to be an exciting discussion in the conference. Allow me then to end by wishing everyone productive learning and listening. Let me thank you all for attending the conference and making it a successful event. Maraming salamat po.
Move forward together. Now let us hear from the chairperson of the Japan Fair Trade Commission. To share a few words, here is Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Takashi Yamamoto, and I'm the Commissioner of the Japan Fair Trade Commission. Although our chair, Mr. Furuya, was supposed to speak at the opening remarks, due to urgent engagement, he was unable to attend today. We are terribly sorry. For this reason, I would like to make opening remarks on his behalf. Well, it is my great pleasure to open the 14th East Asia Conference on Competition Policy and Law from now on. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the Chairman Bernabe, the Commissioner Akwende, and officials of the Philippine Competition Commission for your efforts in setting up this meeting as a host agency. Also, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI, for their support for organizing this meeting as well. The East Asian Conference on Competition Law and Policy was established in 2004 as a forum of presentation and Q&A sessions among participants from academia, the legal field, and competition authorities. Its main object is to build a common understanding of the importance of competition law and policy in the East Asian region. This conference is held as an open event to the public, and it has made great contribution to the public understanding of the importance of competition law and policy or advocacy activity. Today's conference is now being streamed live and can be viewed from around the world, which will have more advocacy effect than usual. Today, we have two sessions. Session one is the effect of sustainability regulations on competition policy. And session two is the interface between competition policy and privacy laws. Both are important topics for competition policy in modern society, where issues on environmental protection and personal information protection are attracting more and more attention. The GFTC has been seeking for the ideal competition policy in the new era in response to the rapid progress of digitalization and globalization. The GFTC recognized that competition policy in the future needs to keep adequately responding to changes in the society and the economy, such as the development of digital technology, while maintaining the universal values of a market economy, such as making businesses active. In particular, the promotion of innovation is essential for sustainable development and improvement of living standards. I believe that the mission of the competition authorities is to ensure the free trade and fair market environment for businesses to be able to maximize the creativity and efforts. Finally, through this meeting, I'm looking forward to hearing various suggestions from the perspectives of academia, the legal field, and competition authorities on the role that competitive authorities should play in maintaining and improving the competitive environment in the rapidly expanding digital economy. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very, very much. That is Commissioner Takashi Yamamoto. Thank you for sharing the message of Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya, sir. Thank you very, very much. And hello to our attendees via Zoom. As Commissioner Yamamoto said, we have an online audience as well. Good morning, and we hope you're enjoying the program so far. Lastly, shall we hear from the Dean of the Asian Development Bank Institute, who will be giving his opening remarks through this video message. Ladies and gentlemen, please take a look at the screens.
Honorable Mr. Emerson B. Akwende, Commissioner of the Philippine Competition Commission. Honorable Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya, Chairman of the Japan Fair Trade Commission. Distinguished moderators, speakers, and participants, good morning. I'm privileged to provide some opening remarks on behalf of ADB Institute, the Tokyo-based think tank of Asian Development Bank. ADBI has proudly continued our journey and partnership with the competition agencies in the region in organizing this annual conference. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the Philippine Competition Commission and the Japan Fair Trade Commission for co-organizing this year's conference. The conference has been organized annually since 2004 to share horizons and raise awareness on the importance of competition law and policy in East Asia region, where people demand socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable economic development. ADBI has supported regional initiatives to mainstream competition law and policy through capacity building and research activities for many years. We hope the EAC conference provide a knowledge exchange platform for competition agencies and the interested public to further propel this regional initiative and strengthen regional networks and nurture future cooperation in this policy area. In the Asia-Pacific region, there are newly launched competition agencies. They have difficulty in exercising actual enforcement. Even well-established agencies face challenges arising from changes in competition landscape due to technological disruptions, the pandemic, geographical conflict, and other factors, including sustainable development goals. Why sustainable development goals causes any problem? For example, efforts to achieve SDGs often involve government interventions to market, which can create an issue of possible adverse impacts on market competition. Likewise, the rapid expansion of e-commerce and other digital services beyond national borders is creating the new opportunities for economic prosperity, but it also creates possible issues of cross-border cartels and abuse of dominance. In addition, it is always difficult to draw the boundary between anti-competitive practices and those practices that improve efficiency. The next two sessions of this EAC conference deal with some of these important challenges. Uncertainty concerning global supply chains and global finance surges. It's even more important to strengthen advocacy and capacity building in the area of competition law and policy. At the heart of our efforts to capture this opportunity, policymakers and experts from different countries must work together to strengthen the competition law and policy framework that can foster better law enforcement, fair markets, and attractive business environments, developing economies to obtain the all-inclusive benefits promised by trade liberalization. Excellencies and distinguished guests, on my final note, I am delighted to see many participants from various sectors attending the conference today. I'm optimistic this event will provide an international platform to share knowledge and policy updates on the related issues. I'd like to encourage further collaboration among regulators and international experts to achieve a more inclusive and resilient economy through the development of appropriate competition policy responses and mechanisms. I look forward to your insights and lively discussion today. To end my remark, I hope you can enjoy the hospitality of Manila, the Philippines. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. That was Dean Sonoville, ladies and gentlemen.
Honorable Mr. Emerson B.
Hello. Thank you very, very much. All right. On that note, then, shall we make it indeed beneficial and inclusive for all? Without further ado, we now begin session 1. And the topic is sustainability regulations have become a noble pursuit in many jurisdictions. But some of these policies are at risk of limiting competition in certain markets. For instance, by limiting the use of coal or other fossil fuels in producing electricity, some power producers may be foreclosed in the market. They shut down. In addition, subsidizing renewable energy may violate the concept of competitive neutrality. This is the main question for session 1. How can policymakers strike the balance between achieving sustainability and maintaining fair market competition? Leading our first discussion, we have Competition Investigations Manager of the New Zealand Commerce Commission. A round of applause for Mr. Richie Hutton. Good morning, Richie. Joining him, we have the head of the Bureau of Public Relations and Cooperation at the Indonesia Competition Commission. A round of applause for Mr. Deswin Noor. Good morning again. This will be a hybrid discussion. Joining us via Zoom, we have our partner at Mori Hamada and Matsumoto. We have Mr. Yusuke Takamiya, who will be joining us via the screen shortly. Good morning to you, Mr. Takamiya. And now let me allow me to introduce our moderator, the Director of the Economics Office at the Philippine Competition Commission. We have Mr. Benjamin E. Radok Jr.
From Jamaica to the world.
Hi, Sir Benjamin. Shall we say a quick good morning to Mr. Takamiya? Take it away, Mr. Benjamin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin Radok. I'm the Economics Director of the Philippine Competition Commission. Welcome to EAC Session 1 on the effect of sustainability regulations on competition policy. So, as we know, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, serve as blueprint to achieve a better and sustainable future for all. The SDGs address important global challenges. You have poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. Recently, investors have also shown interest with their concern on ESG that pertains to environmental, social, and governance criteria, which they use in their investment decisions. There is a view that sustainability regulations may limit competition in certain markets. So in this session, the panel shall explore how sustainability issues can be incorporated in the work of government without violating competition law and other competition-related policies. So it's a difficult balancing act if done in practice. So balancing sustainability goals and competition policy is feasible, on our view, but such balancing act can be challenging. So without further delay, I invite Richie for his talk.
Well, good morning, everybody. First, I just want to thank the organisers of today's event, the Philippine Competition Commission, the Japan Fair Trade Commission, and the Asian Development Bank Institute. And also do want to thank the Philippine Competition Commission for their excellent hospitality over the last few days. The focus of my comments today are on the tension between competition law and collaboration between competitors. The collaboration being that which is undertaken for the purpose of achieving sustainability objectives. Now, first talk about the role of competition. So competition drives businesses to innovate and improve their products and services to meet the customer's preferences. And we know that customers prefer to deal with businesses that have environmentally sound business models. And so in this way, competition and innovation play a role in creating sustainable products and industries. Competition law prevents conduct that undermines that competition. So for example, competition authorities have stressed that the use of sustainability initiatives as a cover for cartels will not be tolerated. In the car emissions case, the European Commission imposed fines of 980 million. In that case, car manufacturers had colluded by agreeing that cleaning car emissions would be to the standard required by law and no more. This was despite the fact that there was relevant technology that could allow them to do better. So through this collusion, the parties avoided competition on green innovation that would have improved outcomes for consumers. Now, consumer law is also relevant. Consumers have a preference for sustainable products, but they must rely on the representations of manufacturers about the sustainability characteristics of their products. It's not easy for customers to check these representations. It is therefore important that consumer agencies act when they see manufacturers misleading consumers about the sustainability characteristics of their products. And this is important for the consumers so that they can buy products that align with their values. For the genuine sustainable manufacturers, so they can reap the rewards of their investments through getting additional customers, and also be incentivized to continue to invest in sustainability. It's also important for the market. With active enforcement, consumers can be confident about representations and will buy more. Sales of sustainable products increases. All of this incentivizes competition on sustainable products, which assists us in achieving our sustainability objectives. So competition and consumer agencies can foster sustainability through targeted enforcement. And for many agencies, this is a priority. So what about collaboration rather than competition between competitors? Well, we also know that collaboration can be an effective way of solving problems that are too big for one business to solve on its own. For example, this may be the case where substantial investment in research and development is required to develop new green technologies. Businesses may also be reluctant to engage in environmentally friendly behaviour on their own when they fear that going it alone would create a first mover disadvantage vis-a-vis their competitor. So what types of collaboration might we see? Well, industry commitments to sustainability-related standards that exceed government standards, agreements about products or packaging, such as packaging size, weight, or recycled content, supply chain restrictions, including perhaps not dealing with businesses that have unsustainable business practices. But not all forms of collaboration are at risk under competition law. But if the collaboration does impact on a dimension of competition, such as price, quality, quantity, innovation, or choice, then or in some significant way, or is a per se conduct such as price fixing, then it might be. So the question is, how does competition law deal with collaboration that reduces competition but also has sustainability benefits? Now, under a consumer welfare test, which most jurisdictions would apply in some way as part of their general prohibition on anti-competitive practices, here I'm excluding per se prohibitions such as price fixing, some sustainability benefits might be relevant. The test allows for the balancing of detriment arising from the loss of competition in the form of higher prices and reduced quality, with any pro-competitive efficiencies that would be passed on to consumers. A consumer welfare test might be able to take into account sustainability factors such as improved quality, for example, replacing plastic with wood, or cost efficiencies that will be passed on to consumers. For example, reducing plastic packaging might reduce cost. But the next question is, how does competition law deal with collaboration that has substantial public benefits? So here I'm talking about broader benefits beyond the immediate price and quality improvements related to the product in question. I'm referring to benefits that might arise from addressing sustainability in other markets, or benefits that arise in the future. This is what we'd think of as public or societal benefits. For example, addressing climate change. This varies a bit in each jurisdiction, depending on whether the relevant competition law allows for some form of public benefit test to be applied. If the jurisdiction has a public benefit test, then these benefits can be taken into account. In some jurisdictions that do not have public benefit tests, they're considering how to take into account these benefits. They're thinking about what they might need to do differently. For example, in the EU, they've amended their horizontal guideline to include the ability to consider what they call collective benefits. These collective benefits focus on positive externalities to society instead of looking at an agreement through the individual customer's perspective. For example, these benefits might include a collaboration's contribution to climate change or the reduction of large-scale pollution. So what happens in New Zealand? Well, in New Zealand, we do have a public benefit test. Where collaboration does impact on competition and businesses might be at risk under our Commerce Act, the parties to the collaboration can apply to us for authorisation. We can authorise a collaboration if there are public benefits that might arise which outweigh the detriments that result from the loss of competition. And sustainability would be a benefit that could be taken into account. The effect of an authorisation is that the parties would not be subject to scrutiny by the Commerce Commission, but importantly, it also protects from third-party action. An example of us considering environmental benefits is the Refrigerant Licensing Trust Board authorisation. Now, in that matter, the refrigerant wholesalers sought to agree to supply refrigerants gas only to customers that were trained and certified to safely handle refrigerants. The primary benefit that we took into account was increased compliance with relevant laws. Flowing from this, our view was that the arrangement would lead to a reduction in the amount of ozone-depleting refrigerants released into the environment. What else are we doing at the New Zealand Commerce Commission? Well, first, we do want to ensure that businesses don't engage in conduct that prevents competition and innovation on sustainability. And we'll prioritise any investigation of conduct that we find of that nature. But we also don't want businesses to abandon collaboration on sustainability initiatives on the grounds of competition issues without careful consideration of whether the collaboration does or does not raise competition concerns or could be authorised by us. Our view is if that businesses have any concerns about proposed sustainability initiatives involving collaboration, they should contact us. We can't provide legal advice, but we can certainly talk through the issues with them. We will also consider how we might provide more public guidance on these issues. To date, we have published product stewardship guidance. This describes a situation where manufacturers, importers and distributors of a product share responsibility for reducing the environmentally impact of that product. For example, the disposal of batteries or chemicals. There are competition law risks when parties seek to coordinate on the recovery of costs associated with such schemes. And finally, engagement with government agencies such as our Ministry for the Environment is also key. These entities will be engaging on sustainability issues and will know where competition law is perceived to be a roadblock. So in conclusion, those are my thoughts on the interplay between competition and collaboration for sustainability reasons. I hope that's been useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. So now I now call on Deswin for his talk.
So, how are you today? I believe you are fully awake after the exciting traditional dance we have earlier, right? So, thank you for having me for this conference. Since today, a public event attended by many stakeholders, including media, I should start my presentation with a disclaimer. What I'm about to say in my presentation are those of my opinion, not to represent the policy of the opinion of my commissions. Thank you. So let me start my presentation by a summary. Start with a summary. I'd say that when it comes to achieving your sustainability, there may be conflicting objectives in your competition law, and there may be unforeseen market shifting. Therefore, competition law and authority must act now, before it's too late. So, to explain this, I will start by saying Indonesia is on its way to achieve its sustainable development goal. We are deadly serious about it because it has become the backbone to achieve Indonesian Vision 2045 and our zero emission by 2060. So this is considered as one of the strategies to make Indonesia to move from its middle income trap. Therefore, we allocated a significant budget for this, for climate change. It is 4.1% of our state budget dedicated to climate change. That's around 123 trillion rupiah, or half of trillion peso. So the government estimate that we can achieve net zero emissions with the investment of 3,799 trillion rupiah, more than our annual state budget. So if anyone here want to invest to green economy in Indonesia, we are more than happy to have you all. Please come to Indonesia and invest, help us with our green economy. So, speaking of its relation to competition law, in my opinion, both subject, in some part, share common objective, which is the people welfare. However, our competition law has another objective, one of which is to provide equal opportunity for large, medium, and small enterprises. This objective, I believe, will cause a conflict when it comes to sustainability. So I will explain it why. So to my knowledge, the main challenge for competition law in relation to sustainability is the first mover advantage, which means an early starter has the ability to gain market power. At least there are 4 issues can cause this. First, transition to green economy expensive. So research by McKinsey said that a country, including government, company, and person, needs to spend additional 3.5 trillion US dollar every year to achieve net zero by 2050. So that's equivalent to Indonesian GDP every year. This means that for Indonesia, we must work twice harder to achieve our sustainability goal. So the second, in order to promote green economy, government must provide many incentives to companies with their sustainable program or products. A lot of them, in Indonesia, we have a lot of incentive for businesses. Like, we can say something like tax holiday, tax allowance, import fee tax, added value tax, land tax, and many other types of tax being provided to this type of company. So the third problem is, the problem is the most likely only large-sized company can make transition faster and gain advantage by such incentive. Sustainable product and services considered to be, but the problem is sustainable product or services considered to be lower in productivity. For example, in energy, the energy return on investment, EROI, we call it EROI, for coal and gas is 50 to 1. So EROI is a ratio for describing a measure of energy produced in relation to the energy used to create it. So which means one energy will, one energy credit can produce 50 energy credit. That's for gas or coal. For nuclear energy, the EROI is 70 to 1. So it's more productive. While for the green energy, the estimate EROI is around 11 to 1. So it means that we will need to build bigger infrastructure, big investment, to achieve the expected or at least the same productivity. So so who will be able to achieve this? For sure, either you are a big company or you consolidate with other businesses, or you collaborate with other businesses to achieve such huge investment. And 4, survey said that consumer is less elastic to the price of green product, which means that compared to the non-green product, which means that consumer is willing to spend more when it comes to green product. Asia Pacific Nutrition Sustainability Survey said that most consumer is willing to spend from 10 to 15% higher for green product. And McKinsey also said that the ability to pay for consumer on green product is different. So we can say that now our consumer accepted the fact that sustainable product is expensive. We can ask that to ourselves, I believe. For example, in electric car in Indonesia, when it came to Indonesia, the price is relatively the same, around 600 million rupiah. So I can buy two of the same car I have today for one electric car. So what's the implication? But consumers are okay with it. People are keep buying it because we value that car higher. So what's the implication? The big company can put an excessive price or high margin to a certain product, and consumer is okay with it. So now our question is how, so putting together these four issues, we can conclude that the big companies can run faster in the race of sustainability, get a lot of incentive to produce sustainable goods or services, can charge high price to consumer, and consumer is welcome to it. So therefore, a lot of big companies rush to take this momentum. As the first mover, they can increase their market power faster than any other companies. So now our question will be, how competition authority play its role? One thing for sure is that competition authority cannot stop the race to sustainability. Therefore, what we can do is to make sure that business environment remain conducive by preventing market concentration to few big companies due to the transition towards sustainability. Competition by government shall provide sufficient level of competition pressure to exist. Competition authority need to make sure that there is no cheater. Companies that use sustainability as a reason to exercise its market power by providing a excessive price to consumer, or unfairly use sustainability reason to get incentive to increase their market power. So we need to observe this potential cheater. So we can find many examples where company unfairly use sustainability reason to gain market power. We know detergent case, we know washing machine case, we have the chicken for tomorrow case in Europe, were several cases that we know related to unfairly use of sustainability reason. In Indonesia, we have the IPOP case. So, IPOP, or Indonesian Palm Oil Pledge, was a deal or a commitment by several companies in palm industry to implement a sustainable palm plantation in all supply chain. So IPOP was signed by 6 big palm oil companies in 2016. So meanwhile, Indonesian government already has an Indonesia Sustainable Palm Oil Standard or certification must be required by all palm oil companies to implement a sustainable palm practice. What different was ISPO used high conservation value forest measures, while IPOP add high carbon stock criteria. So we consider this to create an entry barrier to other companies who met ISPO but not capable for IPOP. Why? Because if we talk about carbon stock criteria, company that can have this are those own big land or large green area. So only this big company, these 6 big company can meet such criteria. So therefore, we require this deal to be cancelled. And we are lucky that they are compliant to this request. And IPOP was cancelled after that. So in addition to the tools, we think that competition authority need to put themselves as a side fever. Again, we don't want to stop the race to sustainability. We must support the process by post ourselves by the side of the road and monitor the development. We can start provide exemption or relaxations to certain sector to push sustainability, and we can start to remove potential conflict in our competition law. For Indonesian competition law, we have an exclusion article which lists around 10 types of exclusion under Indonesia competition law. If I can summarize, there are at least 3 exclusions in Indonesian competition law that may relate to the achievement of sustainability goals. We have the exclusion on activities or agreement to implement certain regulation. We have exclusion for international agreement ratified by government. We have exclusion to agreement for setting of technical product standard which did not limit competition. So this exclusion can disturb KPPU attempt to balance the achievement of sustainability goals and safeguarding competitive market structure. If this fail to get our attention and the government issue a regulation and enter into an agreement, international agreement related to achieving sustainability that provide many flexibility to businesses, then it can be all business conduct related to achieving sustainability is excluded from competition law. So NKPPU will fail to save the market. So that's if we talk about Indonesian competition law. Or if KPPU insists not to be flexible on the exclusion for setting of technical product, then this may stop the business to collaborate and create innovation for sustainable product, because achieving sustainability means new product standard. And of course, it will limit competition in the first place. So at least 3 ways KPPU can prevent this. First, we will need to be active in providing policy advice and recommendation to the government. This means that we need to do a lot of policy analysis. We need to do a lot of market studies related to government prioritized sector for sustainability. I believe that all of us, the government, have defined what are the prioritized sector for sustainability. And second, KPP will need to provide a clear guideline on implementing the exclusion for technical standard products, especially to which extent company are allowed to collaborate or solely create a standard product, and to make sure this standard is not provided to create certain barrier. And the third, related to preventing business consolidation through joint venture, which may lead to unanticipated increase of market concentration. KPPU will need to observe the creation of joint venture by changing its merger notification requirement and require the establishment of joint venture to be notified to competition authority, because at the existing merger notification system, the establishment of joint venture did not fall under the obligation for notification. So the establishment of joint venture is exempted from merger notification now. So we need to change that so that we can observe the creation of joint ventures. A lot of joint ventures are going on now, I believe, for electric car, for battery, for many other products. They start to consolidate and to create a joint venture. But the problem is, sometimes joint venture was created by big companies, large companies. If the authority don't observe the creation of this joint venture in their merger notification system, so yeah, we cannot assess this new company, this new venture. So it is going to be a problem to the authority. So to conclude, the race to sustainability is unstoppable. Every country has different starting point to achieve their sustainable development goal. Some of us are rushing out, like Indonesia. Some of us are already on the right track. Competition authority needs to improve its prevention effort before it's too late. If we are late, then we cannot anticipate change in the market. Market may already concentrated into few big players, and the goal of competition law and sustainability development may not be achieved. So thank you.
Thank you, Deswin. Joining us online is Mr. Yusuke Takamiya. Yusuke, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, it's my great honor to be a panelist at this panel. Thank you for inviting me to this honorable opportunity. Today, I will make a short presentation about sustainability and competition law and policy. I introduce the overview of the issue and some insights from Japan. So I will share my screen. Okay. So this presentation, I think the other speakers concisely and successfully introduced the issue precisely. So I think some of my presentation will make a crossover of the previous speakers, but because this topic is very important, so it would be great if you could hear my presentation, even if it is crossover with other speakers. The first slide introduced the introduction of green economy and sustainability. It explained the concept of green economy and sustainability, but the important thing is that the green economy and the various sustainability initiatives behind it are rapidly expanding among various aspects of society. And as a practitioner, competition law practitioner, I found that businesses have strong interest in engaging activities pursuing green economy and or sustainability goals. And you know that the United Nations provide the 17 SDGs goals as a major policy objectives in relation to sustainability. These 17 goals include a lot of green or the environmental purposes and other social and public goals like no poverty, no hunger, and other things. And as a background of such a basic understanding of the sustainability or the environmental initiatives, I would like to confirm that the background on issues concerning the green economy and antitrust and competition law. As the previous speakers also noted, the purpose of the antitrust and competition law is to ensure free and fair competition and to benefit consumers. On the other hand, the environmental and sustainability responsiveness is a goal to be pursued in the medium to long term by the economy as a whole. And in order to reduce environmental sustainability impact, and it may appear desirable to do things that have not necessarily been considered legitimate from the perspectives of antitrust and competition law. Few examples, such a kind of conflict between the sustainability matters and the competition antitrust law is the agreement on research and development to reduce emissions, or refusal to do business with refusal to do business with businesses with insufficient environmental considerations, or imposition of discriminatory trading conditions to such not environmentally friendly businesses. And as for the merger control of business combinations issues, business combinations between companies with high market shares that contribute to the development of technologies that reduce environmental impact may be an issue that make conflict between the sustainability goals and competition law. And I think that the core issues from antitrust competitive perspectives is that if a business activities has a negative impact on the short-term profits of consumers in the relevant market, but has a positive impact on the medium to long-term profits of consumers in the overall society and overall economy, how antitrust and competition law are to be applied to the situation. It is important to note that there is a widely accepted presumptions to discuss this topic. Efforts that unfairly harm consumers' interests in the form of higher prices are never permissible under antitrust and competition laws. The second widely accepted presumption is that in promoting environmental considerations, environmental regulations, that is, the environmental policies and environmental laws, are the most direct and effective means, while the competition policies and antitrust competition laws play a complementary role, not the central role, but the complementary role. And final point I'd like to mention is that in discussing the issue, it is very important not to hinder or the efforts of businesses or companies to respond to the green sustainable economy by increasing the predictability of antitrust competition laws enforcement. These are very important presumptions. So based on these backgrounds, I listed some typical examples of conflicts between antitrust competition laws and sustainable or the environmental initiatives. I will mention some major issues. As for the horizontal conduct, some very major issues is that the discussions among major manufacturers in the market to jointly close manufacturing facilities that have low production costs but heavy in environmental impact. As for the exclusionary conduct, typical example or in my brain is that the negative campaigns made by dominant manufacturers targeting a new entrant for accusing heavy environmental impact of its supply chain. It may cause some exclusionary effect. And as for the exploitative conduct. This example may make some questions. That is, a request from retailers with superior bargaining positions to suppliers with relatively weaker positions to use packaging materials that have a low environmental impact at increased costs. Some of you may know that Japan has a legal concept of abuse of superior bargaining position, not for market power or the unilateral conduct. So we have to care about the abuse of superior bargaining positions. Then I presented this example. And other example also may make some issues between the competition law and sustainability or environmental matter. From here, I will explain the situation in Japan. Actually, there are no specific provisions in laws or regulations related to antitrust competition laws that require direct consideration of environmental or sustainability considerations. However, in the guidelines and operational standards level, Japan has some history to handle this issue. As for the guidelines under the anti-monopoly law regarding joint efforts for recycling, we call it recycling guideline. It says that even if the costs required for recycling are shared, if the ratio of such costs to the selling price of the product is small, it is unlikely that there will be a problem. It is unlikely that there will be a problem under the anti-monopoly law. The impact on competition is small and unlikely to be a problem if it does not unfairly discriminate or coerce certain businesses. And other guidelines also mention some sustainability or public social or purposes. Such guidelines include the guidelines about activities of business associations and guidelines about the joint research and development guidelines. These guidelines touch the application of the competition law and social and public important purposes. In addition to the guidelines, it is worth noting that some some responses to the consultation under general consultation system also touch this topic. I list one example or one such example. It treats the efforts by business associations to agree a unit price in connection with the introduction of a charge for plastic bags. You know, the plastic bags are not welcomed by consumers these days because it makes high environmental effect or heavy environmental burden to the world economy. So this case says that the JFTC had a position that the agreement to introduce a charge for plastic bags between retailers is not immediately problematic under the anti-monopoly law for certain reasons. If I have a time, I would like to explain it in detail about the reasons, but because of time constraints, I just mentioned this case exists. Finally, I would like to share some insights about this topic. In my impression, an overview of the debate on a green economy and antitrust law in Japan like follows. In Japan, the relationship between the green economy and antitrust competition law has not necessarily been discussed as an independent and specific issue yet. On the other hand, from the viewpoint of promoting recycling in particular, as I mentioned, certain guidelines have been provided. And as for other policy topics, the JFTC already provided some guidance to this relevant topic. In addition, the concept of joint activities for social and public purposes has been clarified to a certain extent in the examples in the guidelines and in response to the public consultation, as I mentioned. So for the authorities staffs in the meeting, I would like to make some comments to this topic. I think that the discussions on green economy and the sustainability initiative and antitrust and competition law are rapidly developing internationally and expect to continue to the future. And previous panelists says in Europe, attempts to handle these issues by horizontal guidelines or other policy documents are currently ongoing. On the other hand, in the same as Europe, outside of Europe, there is a strong interest among people in competition law community, and there have been many exchanges of opinion about the publication of papers and articles on this topic. So this is my implications or suggestions. So considering the above mentioned circumstances, it may be a reasonable option for authorities in East Asian countries to address the relationship between green economy or sustainability initiatives and antitrust law. And considering the trends of international discussions, such an attempt may contribute to international discussions to start discussing the issue in its jurisdictions. Sustainability, including environmental considerations, is becoming an increasingly important aspect of corporate activities. So analyzing the application of competition laws in the area will help provide productivity of companies. It will help them promote the fair competition. The final slide explains that Japan's approach or the a kind of approach to the desirable competition policy. This slide explains that in order to pursue the sustainability suitable competition policy for GX, green total transformation, and or sustainability, we can consider existing precedents of the authorities' responses and existing guidelines which mention relevant topics. And also, we have to analyze the latest trends of other authorities, in particular, the advanced jurisdictions, Europe. So it may be a good idea to consider providing some policy statements which clarifies the antitrust competition application to this topic. This is my presentation. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, please continue.
Are competing among themselves are expected to provide social gains that are consistent with the SDGs. However, such agreements may also give rise to competition concerns. For example, if they have an agreement, then that would allow them or that would facilitate collusion to happen. Given this, what recommendations can you offer to firms who are interested in coming up with sustainability agreements so that they limit their exposure to such risk? Maybe we could call on Richie first.
Sure. Well, I think that's a really important point. It is really incumbent on competition agencies to engage with businesses that are thinking about these sort of initiatives. And I think about it in three ways. First, they need to know when they're at risk. So as I said in my presentation, if that collaboration impacts on a dimension of competition in a significant way or is per se conduct, then they might be at risk. And I think a key message is that that risk is heightened when it's per se conduct. I think another key message is that to avoid the risk of breaching competition law, or even just to avoid the risk of harming competition, businesses should really focus on restrictions on competition only to the extent that's really necessary to achieve the particular objective of the collaboration. Now, the other thing businesses need to know is how to mitigate the risk, reduce the impact of the conduct. And I think that's going to depend very much on particular circumstances of the collaboration that we're talking about. But by way of example, collaboration to create sustainability standards might restrict competition. But businesses can mitigate the harm in that sort of factual scenario in a number of ways. The standard should not be mandatory. It shouldn't prevent businesses from going beyond the standard. It shouldn't be exclusive to a certain set of businesses. So all of these different things businesses can do to reduce the risks. And the third important thing is that businesses need to be aware of exceptions and exemptions and, in New Zealand, authorisations. So ways that even if there is an impact on competition and it is potentially at risk, that there are ways to get through this when the benefits of a sustainability initiative actually outweigh the harm to competition.
Thanks, Richie. Deswin?
I believe Richie explained it all, but just to summarize what he said, at least to do that, we need to have something, guideline, guidance, regulation that can be used as a base by the businesses for them to get a clear way of collaborate. So that's the things that we believe the authority need to think of.
Thank you. Yusuke, may we request your view?
Okay, thank you. I think that for companies or businesses, it is really important to analyze the positive effects of the sustainability or the environmental agreement before implementing such kind of conduct. And it is also very important to evaluate in advance that the effect of such conducts are to be realized only by the conduct, such as between the conduct between the competitors, the business is currently thinking. But other thing I would like to mention is that it is not necessary for businesses to fear too much about competition law, because the major part of the business activities which pursue the sustainability goals are to be permitted under current antitrust competition law. That is my insight.
Very important question, I think, especially that would concern competition authorities and other regulators. If you incorporate sustainability in the implementation of competition policy, it could be perceived by businesses as another layer of, and it could be, but it is potentially considered as anti-business, given the examples which were presented earlier. Now, given this potential difficulty that competition authorities might encounter, what recommendations, maybe on the advocacy side, do you think competition authorities would be useful? Right? What recommendations could be useful to competition authorities for them to address this difficulty? So again, maybe start with Richie.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that competition law does take into account sustainability. As I mentioned, the New Zealand regime does manage to do that. And I think that that it's important that each jurisdiction does think about how it is that they can take into account sustainability, that they can balance the benefits of sustainability initiatives with the impact of a loss of competition. As we saw in the example I gave about the European Union and the work they've done to try and incorporate thinking on sustainability. So yeah, I think that, I don't think that's anti-business, I think that's pro-business.
Thank you. Deswin?
Yes, I think I explained this in the presentation before. What we can do as the authority is to be a side viewer. We don't stop the race to sustainability, right? What we do is to be on site. We monitor everything. We do policy analysis. We do market studies. We focus on the sectors which are prioritized by government as the as the priority to move for sustainability. So they have a list of sectors, right, like energy and such. So we can focus on that sectors, and then
they apply antitrust competition law. So this is the topic of sustainability and competition law sounds new topic, but it may be traditional. It may be a kind of similar topic with the traditional topic. So authority is better exploring existing discussions. Then they may, it is a wise, smart idea for the authorities to compile a kind of the new policy document to increase productivity of the companies which may try to pursue sustainability, environmental considerations. That is my thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this session. So I hope we gain some insights that are useful for our operations. So, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Again, that was our moderator, Mr. Benjamin Radok Jr., as well as our panelists. Gentlemen, may I ask you to please rise and stand center stage for a photo opportunity. Shall we include Mr. Takamiya? There you go. Sir Takamiya, you will be included in the photo op. Please smile. Look straight at your camera. This is the best part of being digital. Everyone is still connected, even if you're joining us via Zoom. There you go. Please smile. That is Mr. Richie Hutton, Mr. Deswin Noor, Mr. Yusuke Takamiya, and our moderator, Mr. Benjamin E. Radok Jr. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have earned a coffee break. Everyone, you may please rise, get some refreshments, take the time to stretch and get your blood moving. At the same time, you have evaluation forms, I think, that was submitted. If you can, please answer your evaluation forms for the first session and then come back at 11 a.m. so that we may resume the program with our panel discussion number 2. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you at 11 a.m.
Captured effortlessly, that's the way it worked. Happened so naturally, I did not know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What would
we are taking this opportunity to network and have to mingle with each other. We encourage that during the long lunch that we will be having after this final panel discussion. Now, before we resume the program, a couple of reminders. We would like to request that you answer the evaluation forms. They are either in your EAC program books. There is a QR code also on your tables. Kindly look at the center of your tables for the QR code. So please do feel free to scan those QR codes, and we look forward to your feedback. So now, moving right on into our last panel discussion for the day, the rapid growth of the digital economy brought new challenges for regulators, largely because these platforms break established boundaries of markets, jurisdictions, and regulations. Policy areas that were previously separate have now become interlinked, and regulatory agencies must now consider policy objectives that may contrast their own. In many circumstances, the objectives of promoting competition and protecting personal data, they overlap with each other. But it always isn't the case. So for this next and final session, we will tackle the issues surrounding the intersection of competition and privacy policies. Once again, the interaction of competition and privacy policies. What are the opportunities to harmonize initiatives to promote and protect these two sectors? Leading the discussion, let us now invite on stage the Chief Executive Officer of the Australia Competition and Consumer Commission, Mr. Scott Gregson. Oh, there he is. Hi, good morning, Scott. Joining him, we have a member of the Commission of the Malaysia Competition Commission, Mr. Nasaruddin Abdul Rahman. Good morning. And representing the Director of the Privacy Policy Office at the National Privacy Commission, that is Mr. Franklin Anthony M. Tabakin IV, we have with us Ms. Ivy Grace Villasoto. Hi, Ms. Ivy. This panel will be moderated by the Program Director of the Competition Law and Policy Program of the University of the Philippines College of Law. A warm round of applause, please, for Ms. Gwen Grecia de Vera. Hi, Ms. Gwen. Competition, privacy policies. Here we go. Take it away, Ms. Gwen.
Thanks very much and good day to everyone. I am pleased to welcome everyone to Session 2 of the 14th East Asia Conference. This second session, as our host has already mentioned, will cover the interface between competition policy and privacy laws. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic has hastened the shift to the digital economy, challenging regulators across consumer protection, competition enforcement, and data privacy protection. The growth of e-commerce and digital markets has blurred regulatory boundaries that sector regulators and competition authorities have observed in the past. This session in particular aims to shed light on the interplay of, as well as the tensions between competition policy and privacy regulation in the digital era. In many circumstances, as our host has mentioned, the objectives of promoting competition and protecting personal data overlap. However, this may not always be the case. In the Philippines, this policy integration and policy tension are highlighted by the statutory mandate to promulgate the national competition policy. And earlier this year, our competition authority and privacy agency inked a memorandum of agreement covering various areas of cooperation. We are fortunate this morning to have a panel from various jurisdictions dealing with unique and emerging issues in these areas, and that each have legislation separately covering data privacy protection and competition. Our distinguished panelists will bring today the experience of their respective agencies, whose mandate vary in scope from competition and consumer protection to data privacy. Allow me to introduce each of them briefly before we call on them for their presentations. Our first presenter will be Scott Gregson, the Chief Executive Officer of the Australia Competition and Consumer Commission. Scott has held the Chief Executive Officer role at the ACCC since April 2020, following a career dating back to 1996 when he joined the agency as a graduate. The CEO is ACCC's senior management position, leading the executive leadership team and managing the day-to-day operations of the ACCC, its people and resources. After Scott, we will hear from Dr. Nasaruddin Abdul Rahman. NASA is a member of the Commission of the Malaysia Competition Commission and an assistant professor at the Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws, International Islamic University, Malaysia. And as mentioned earlier, we were earlier supposed to have with us Director Franklin Tabakin. Unfortunately, he is unable to join us today, and we have with us Attorney Ivy Grace T. Villasoto, the Division Chief of the Privacy Development Division of the National Privacy Commission. Attorney Villasoto has been part of the National Privacy Commission since 2016, and prior to joining the Commission, she served as Director for Tax Services at SGV & Co. So to get our discussion started, I'd like to invite Scott.
First of all, I'd like to thank our hosts, the PCC, the JFTC and the ADBI. It is a privilege to attend and participate in this forum, and I'd like to thank all attendees for your attention. Is this breaking up a little? No? Okay. Let me first start by agreeing with the proposition in the topic that we are both seeing synergies and tensions in the competition, consumer and privacy issues arising from digital businesses. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, or the ACCC, is both the competition... I thought it might have been, that's much better. Let me just start again. I do want to start with agreeing with that proposition in the topic, that there are both synergies and tensions in competition, consumer and privacy issues arising from digital businesses. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, or the ACCC, is the competition and consumer regulator in Australia. We do not, however, have responsibility for privacy issues, which sits with our Information Commissioner. The ACCC now has deep exposure to competition, consumer and privacy issues arising from digital platforms, with a dedicated and now expert team that specialises in digital platforms. In 2019, we issued a comprehensive report into digital platforms, and since then have issued 4 more reports or interim reports, with a 5th report to be provided to the Australian Government this week. To understand the synergies and tensions of competition, consumer and privacy issues with digital platforms, you need to be reminded of the sources of power and incentives of platforms and the vital importance of data. The fundamental business model of platforms like Google, Meta and others is to attract a large number of users and to build rich data sets. The ubiquity of these platforms and presence in related markets allows them to build particularly valuable data sets and to monetize these through advertising. In our 2019 report, we found that Google had substantial market power in relation to search and search advertising. We also found that Facebook, now Meta, had substantial degree of market power in the markets for social media and display advertising. This market power was derived from barriers to entry and expansion from at least 3 areas. First, the strong network effects. the concept here that the value of the service requires a large number of users. Secondly, from economies of scale and scope. That is, the larger you are, the broader your activities, the cheaper the average cost. And thirdly, the high sunk and switching costs that the business and consumers face, meaning that new entrants face significant risk of losing the investment they make in establishing a rival platform. This market power is entrenched by strategic behaviour and strategic acquisitions that both remove data competitors and enhance their own data advantage. So in these digital markets, data is both king-maker and king-keeper. Data is essential. It is also the common thread that gives rise to the intersection between competition, consumer, and privacy issues. We see these issues distinctly but linked. In competition, we see data market power leveraged to involve self-preferencing, tying, exclusivity, barriers to switching, and the denial of interoperability. In consumer cases, we see the absence of transparency, a lack of dispute resolution, exposure to scams and false reviews, and concepts such as dark patterns where consumer behaviour might be influenced, or unfair terms or behaviours. With a privacy lens, we see the absence of genuine consent, we see a loss of control of data, a risk of unauthorised use of data, and a risk of loss of data to bad actors, such as scammers. These issues and conduct are all linked through the market power and data that feeds it. So what do we do as regulators with some levers, in the ACCC's case, competition and consumer, but not all levers? We don't have the privacy regulation. In considering this, I often go back to the Tinbergen rule, named after the famous Dutch economist. He stated that governments should use multiple policy instruments to target multiple policy targets. So it is sound for governments to have separate competition, consumer and privacy rules, and potentially to have separate regulators across those genres. But this doesn't remove the importance of being conscious of and looking to coordinate or contribute across the three areas that we're talking about. And I see three clear ways we can do this. First, the importance of cooperation, engagement, joint forums with different regulators or authorities. In Australia, we have recently formed a forum of regulators that we call DPReg, or Digital Platform Regulators. It comprises the ACCC, our Information Commissioner, our Communications Regulator that brings in telcos, and our eSafety Commissioner that looks at safety online. We meet regularly, identify issues, share information, collaborate on the activity that we might take. I know other jurisdictions have similar forums or ways of getting regulators together. I spoke yesterday to Japan and the mechanisms they've got in place to ensure regulators come together and share those information and insights. It is vital. Secondly, authorities should continue to bring these issues together in strong advocacy. The half a dozen ACCC digital platform reports or interim reports do this. Advocacy through market studies and other mechanisms exposes the related issues. It allows policymakers to consider options to address them and places businesses in the spotlight and identifies further action that regulators can take either through enforcement action or elsewhere. The accumulation of these reports and insights across the world, including in the Asian region, is now a rich set of information for us to use in these advocacy ways. and it is essential that it continues to explore the new issues that will emerge with digital markets. Third, in my view, it's important that regulators continue to take action under their provisions, their powers, their set of activities. It's important that they do so to contribute to exposing and addressing the common issues across the different genres of competition, consumer and privacy. The ACCC has taken 4 court actions to do this in recent times. 2 against Google-related entities and 2 against Facebook, now Meta. Each of these have been pursued under the consumer law in Australia, with proceedings instituted in our federal court by the ACCC. One of them has been resolved, the other 3 are still before the courts. I'm going to talk you through those 4 cases very quickly now, with a view to demonstrating the synergies, the overlap, the common issues that emerge between competition, consumer and privacy matters. Please bear in mind that the 3 latter ones are still before the courts, and these are just the ACCC allegations. The first case I'll mention was recently concluded, with the court imposing penalties of $60 million against relevant Google entities. The court found that the relevant Google entities had made misleading representations about the collection and the use of their personal location data on Android phones. It did this by representing that the setting titled Location History was the only setting affecting location data, whereas it had another setting titled Web and App Activity that also enabled Google to collect, store and use location data when turned on. And in this case, it was turned on by default. Location data can have great value to business, but it can also have great sensitivity to consumers. This case is a great example of that synergy between the areas of consumer, which was the vehicle that the ACCC used in court, but also competition in terms of its connection with market power, the use of data, and the privacy issues that consumers were experiencing. In a different case against Google, relevant Google entities that is still before the courts, the ACCC has alleged that the Google entities misled Australian consumers to obtain their consent to expand the scope of personal information that Google could collect and combine about the consumer's internet activity for use by Google, including for targeted advertising. We allege that the relevant Google entities failed to properly inform consumers and did not get consent about its move in 2016 to start to combine information from Google accounts with information from non-Google sites, and in this case, formerly known as DoubleClick. This meant that the data about users' non-Google online activity became linked to the Google information. Accumulation, combination of data enhances its value to the business, but exposes consumers to greater issues of personal information being held, retained, used and potentially exposed. Again, this is another great example of where consumer law issues will cross over with both competition and privacy. Our third case I'll mention is in relation to Facebook. Again, this matter is still before the courts, and we've taken it against relevant Facebook entities, now Meta. We've alleged false and misleading or deceptive conduct when promoting Facebook's Anavo product mobile app. The Anavo Protect mobile app was a free application providing a virtual private network or VPN service. We say that Facebook entities misled consumers by saying that the product would keep users' activity data private, protected and secret and not used for any other purposes other than the running of the service. The ACCC has alleged that in fact an Anavo product collected and used significant data for Facebook's benefit. This included details of users' internet and app activity, such as every application that they accessed and for how long. We say that Facebook was using this data for market research, which could include gathering information for potential acquisition targets in the future. This really demonstrates that leak into the competition area, where the use of that information potentially in a misleading way, or the gathering of that information in a potentially misleading way, had a competition lens to it as well. The final and more recent case that I'll mention, again, is in relation to Facebook or Meta. Again, this matter is before the courts, and so these are the ACCC allegations only at this stage. We say that in relation to its role in publishing celebrity crypto ads on Facebook, we allege the conduct was false or misleading or deceptive. The ads promoted investment in cryptocurrency or money-making schemes and purported to be associated with well-known people in Australia. Effectively, these schemes were scams. We say that Meta knew, failed to take effective action, and was therefore responsible for the ads published on their platforms. All four of these cases demonstrate the intersection between competition, consumer, and privacy issues. In my view, it's important that competition and consumer regulators and privacy regulators continue to take actions in these areas to identify the issues, to expose them for possible consideration by the courts, and ultimately inform the broader policy environment that we may operate in. I look forward to other speakers to come now and to any questions that we take. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. Thank you for sharing, particularly the initiatives in relation to digital platforms. I'd now like to ask, and let us all welcome NASA for his presentation.
Hello everyone, good morning. Good afternoon or good morning. So, I'm sorry. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizer, the IDBI, GFTC, and also PCC for organizing an excellent event, and also for allowing us to speak in this event on behalf of my CC. Like Mr. Deswin, I also have a disclaimer. Because I'm willing to head some lecturer and also member of the commission, so whatever comes from me is purely based on my personal view and does not represent the commission. Okay, and when we talk about the interface between competition law and also data protection law, so I believe it is about synergies and also tension or conflict, but for today, I'm going to focus on the synergy rather than the conflict because of time constraint. And I believe, from my hypothesis, there's a strong synergies or symmetries between competition law and also data protection law, at least from theoretical perspective as far as Malaysia is concerned, because just to inform, we don't have any single case to support, or we don't have any guidelines to illustrate. And what I did some research based on important literatures as well as guidelines and few cases, especially the case of Facebook, because it's very important and relevant to Malaysia because our Competition Act mirror the EU Treaty on competition law. So anything happens in Europe is very relevant to Malaysia. That's why Facebook is the main case study in my presentation. Okay, can we go to the second slide? Sorry. Okay, before I start about the interaction between competition law and also data protection law, before I discuss more complex issue, Okay, let me bring your attention to the structure of our Competition Act and also our Personal Data Protection Law. Okay, Personal Data Protection Act. If you can see, the competition law is not so complex as compared to PDPA, okay, Personal Data Protection Act. So, Competition Act contains two important provisions. Section 4 deals with anti-competitive agreements. Section 10 deals with abuse of dominant positions. And just to inform, we don't have merger control provision, but we are going to amend our law. Is still in the proposed stage decisions. Hopefully, we can have merger control provision by next year. But I'm not sure because our election is around the corner. Okay, and as far as Personal Data Protection Act or Personal Data Protection Law, you can see it's more complex. Of course, there are a number of provisions, but I just put some provision which I think important and also relevant for our discussion. You can see, especially the provision of consent. So we cannot process personal data without the consent of data subject. Of course, subject to exception and also justification. For example, when the data processing is necessary for the performance of the contracts to which data subject is a party. And we also have, for example, section 6, which laid down the principle of lawfulness, the principle of necessity, and also proportionality. So data processing cannot be done except for a lawful purpose directly related to the activities of the users. And that data processing is necessary to achieve the objective and must not be excessive to achieve that purpose. So basically it's quite similar to GDPR in EU. Of course, the arrangement of section is different. And section 7, for example, talk about the transparency and also choice. So there is obligations put on the data user to inform data subject about the data processing activities, including descriptions about the data itself and the purpose of the data collection and processing. And there's also principles of purpose limitations and also data minimizations and data retentions, right to withdraw consent, and so on and so forth. Okay, before I discuss about a more complex issues, so let me bring you to the basic issue about the objective of both legislations and how both legislation reinforce each other's goals. If you look at the Competition Act 2010, the purpose or the aim of the Competition Act is to promote the process of competition. It is not a consumer legislation, but the main important objective is just like the EU to promote the competitiveness of the markets or to preserve the freedom to compete. Of course, Roy will not disagree with me, back in Malaysia. But that's from my observation after 6 years in my CC. So, but what I can say, the consumer will naturally benefit from the protections of the competitions in the form of lower price, good quality of services, and also wider choices and preferences. So when you see the data protection law, so the objective of data protection law is to regulate the data processing activities. Okay, so but the rights of the user to data privacy is not an absolute right. Of course, the right of data subject is not an absolute right, but the data user can process the data subject to the principle that I mentioned, the lawfulness, the proportionality and necessity. So what I'm going to highlight here is that how these two laws reinforce each other's goals. So competitions encourage companies to compete, especially in terms of price. So price competition is an important parameter as far as Malaysia is concerned. So if you can look at our cases, mainly deals with price-related issues, especially cartel. So price is very important. But we cannot rule out the importance of privacy in future, taking into consideration the rapid developments of e-commerce in Malaysia, and company may compete for privacy. So if I can highlight to you examples, actually we are going to amend our data protection law. So there are a few important provisions. Of course, I don't have details about the provision. That's a few important provisions. For example, the introductions of privacy by default or privacy by design, which requiring the data user to come up with measures at the earliest stage of the design or processing operations. So if that's the case, if it is a requirement, so I think competition in terms of privacy is very important, and it will support the objective of the competition law. And the second shared objective which I want to highlight is actually the choice, because when there is a intense competition, so it gives the user, the consumer and user multiple choices, wider choices and preferences. So that's actually also very relevant to data protection law, because the main idea to have data protection law is actually to give or to guarantee the data subjects right to informational self-determinations, or the right to control over your data. So there is also a study, for example, in the case of Facebook, where when there is a market power or the market concentrations, it will lead to, for example, restriction of the choice, and the data subject will lose control over the personal data, which I will deal or explain later. That's very important. So I also want to highlight to you there are two important proposed provisions for the amendments of the Data Protection Act. One is data portability. So the act, the proposed amendment seeks to include data portability. And for me, this data portability also can support the objective of the competition law, because the data subject can apply to get access to the data and to reuse the data for different services, and they can transfer the data from one user to another. So it will activate the competitions, and it will generate wider choices and preference for consumer in terms of maybe innovative products and also preferences. That's actually, for me, this is a very important development where we can see there is a strong synergy or symmetries between competition law and also data protection law, and how these two legislation reinforce each other's goals. Okay, from based on my experience, from the enforcement perspective, what I can say is that there are few possible interaction between the two, competition law and data protection law, but I want to focus on breach of data protection law amount to breach of competition law, as the case of Facebook, for example. And there's also, for example, the possibility where complying with the data protections can also amount to breach of competition law. So that one I skip, so I want to focus on whether competition law can be applied to the area of privacy, data privacy, as per the case of Facebook. Because in Malaysia, there is no exclusive jurisdictions over data privacy issue. It can be dealt with by competition authority, data protection authority, as well as consumer authority. So there is no exclusive jurisdictions. And for me, the data protection law is not adequate to deal with the issue of market failures because of anti-competitive agreement, abuse of dominant position. And the abusive conducts, the effect of abusive conducts on the market is far-reaching. I mean, it does not only affect the data subject, but also the competitiveness of the market. That's why I think the competition law is also relevant and can expand the scopes to the area of data privacy. And from my study, in the case of Facebook, so competition law can be used to reinforce and strengthen data protection rules. And of course, data protection law does not concern about the role of data, but the competition authority may take into consideration the role and importance of data, for example, in assessing dominant positions and the importance of data for businesses. And most importantly is whether we can use the standards or the principle in data protection law to prove the infringement of competition law or competition act. Okay, this is the interlink or relationship between competition law and personal data protections. If you look at the assessment that on the screens, as I mentioned before, consent is a very important aspect in personal data protection. You cannot get or you cannot process data without the consent of the data subject. But consent may not be freely given. Maybe it's because of forced consent or because imbalance of power between the parties, especially big data companies. So big data companies has the incentive to bundle the consent and also the service. It means that, okay, you need to give consent to unlimited data processing before you use our service, even though that excessive data is not necessary for the performance of the contracts or is not directly or necessarily related to the activities of the user, just like in the case of Facebook. So market power can also explain the situation of privacy paradox, the inconsistency between our concerns about our data and also our actual disclosure of the data. So we are worried about our data, but at the end of the day, we disclose our data because of various reasons. So from the case of Facebook, it may be because of the manifestation of the market power. That's strong interplay between competition law and also data protection. That's why when there's strong interplay, when there is a strong market power and there is a limited or close substitutes or alternative, then the competition law can interfere. So privacy intrusions, as far as competition law is concerned, fall within the exploitative behavior, just like in Malaysia we have exploitative and exclusionary behavior. And for exploitative behavior, it is basically based on unfair price and also trading condition. But unfair price is very difficult to prove, but unfair trading condition much more easier to prove. That's why the competition authority in Germany, they focus on unfair trading conditions because it's, I think, much easier to prove. But as far as the personal data protection is concerned, unfairness can be interpreted in the form of exclusive disclosure, where the consumer has limited choice to decide how the data can be disposed in a self-determined manner. So, as I mentioned before, just now, it is all about consent. Okay, so market power can also limit the choice to decide because the big players try to bundle or involve in a situation we call it privacy policy tying, where you just consent to one term and conditions, but they can get the data excessively when you use the platform and outside the platforms without obtaining a separate consent. Okay, that's a strong interplay. Sorry, give me 2 minutes. And in order to prove the excessive, in order to prove the exploitative behavior, so I think there's a synergy between the standard of proof in competition law and also data protection law, because in order to prove the unfair term and conditions, we take into consideration the proportionality, necessity, and transparency. This is also element that have in our PDPA. So that is why there is a possible for me that it is a possible to use the standard in the personal data protection law to prove the infringement under the competition law, as long as we also fulfill the requirements of to prove the abusive conduct under the competition law. But my conclusion is that breach of data protection is not sufficient to hold the big data players liable for competition law, because remember, the objective of the competition law is to promote the competition. So at the end of the day, breach of data is not enough. You need to prove that this conduct also has impaired the development of competitions and the freedoms of the freedom to compete. We need to prove also how this unfair trading condition impede the ability of the players to compete in the market, just like in the case of Facebook. If we don't have this second element, there is no difference between competition law, data privacy, and also consumer. For that, I end my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, NASA, for your presentation on the complementarity between competition law and privacy law. We are grateful to the National Privacy Commission for the presence today of Attorney Ivy. So we'd like to call on her for her presentation.
Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for inviting the National Privacy Commission in the 14th East Asia Conference on Competition Law and Policy. Director Tabakin sends his regards to everyone and apologizes for not being able to attend this prestigious event today. So, I'll be briefly discussing the interface between competition policy and privacy laws. So we always say during our data privacy seminars and introduction to the Data Privacy Act of 2012 that data privacy is a competitive differentiator in the digital economy. But we are just starting really to understand what really is the shared interest between competition policy, competition laws, as well as data privacy laws. The National Privacy Commission is a member of the Global Privacy Assembly. In 2019, the Global Privacy Assembly, which was then known as the International Conference of Data Protection and Privacy Commissioners, in 2019, it issued a resolution which supports and facilitates the co-regulatory cooperation between data protection authorities, consumer protection, and competition authorities to achieve consistently high standards for data protection. This particular resolution in 2019 also confirmed the mandate of the Digital Citizen and Consumer Working Group, which was mandated to explore more the intersection, the interface between competition, consumer protection, as well as privacy laws. Now, during the next 2 years, in 2020 and 2021, this particular working group, of which the National Privacy Commission is also a member, commissioned a study on the intersection of privacy and competition. This was written by Assistant Professor Erica Douglas, entitled Digital Crossroads, the Intersection of Competition Law and Data Privacy, from the Temple University Beasley School of Law in the US. The succeeding slides actually relied heavily on this academic review, which will discuss the shared interests of competition and data privacy, as well as the intersection of competition and the data privacy laws. So for shared interests of these areas of laws, the most common that we usually encounter would be data portability rights and consumer choice, or getting consent from the data subjects. So for data portability, this is seen as beneficial for both privacy as well as competition. It has become one of the most emphasized areas of complementarity between these areas of law. And of course, both privacy and competition would seek to encourage consumer choice or getting the valid consent from our data subjects, specifically when we are processing their personal data. For portability or data portability rights, this is already in our Data Privacy Act of 2012. All data subjects have the right to obtain from personal information controllers a copy of his or her personal data, have the same transferred to another PIC in an electronic or structured format that is commonly used and allows for further use. Data portability rights are seen to be promoting data-driven competition, and it would reduce barriers to consumers which would want to switch service providers, for example. For consumer choice, antitrust and data protection authorities, of course, share a policy interest in promoting consumer choice and mutual concern over impediments to such choice. It was mentioned earlier that sometimes when we get consent from the data subjects, it's really not a valid consent because it was not specific enough, or the consent form given was in some way misleading or deceiving to our data subjects, exploiting our consumer biases. So in our Data Privacy Act of 2012, consent is specifically defined. It must be freely given, it must be specific, it must be informed, it must be an indication of will. So all of these elements must be present if processing of personal data is based on consent. So moving on to the intersection of data privacy and competition, the academic review of Professor Douglas also posited this theory that privacy as a quality, theory that antitrust analysis should consider data privacy when privacy is a parameter of a product or a service quality that is affected by competition. I'm not quite sure if all our competition authorities present are already considering or would agree with this leading theory on the intersection. So for merger reviews, it was said in that academic review that we must consider the relevance of privacy-based competition in merger reviews, but that the interaction is still at the very early stages of theory and practice. There's also the agreement among antitrust agencies that data privacy may be considered as an element of quality-based competition, and that it is often supported for the view that privacy may be a parameter of competition only in certain markets. Next slide, please. For abuse of dominance and data privacy, this academic review explored or discussed a bit the German Competition Authority that is pursuing an exploitative abuse case that combines antitrust and data privacy law. This also involves Facebook, alleging that Facebook used its market power to impose terms of service that compelled users to excessive disclosure of their personal data. It argues that Facebook violated privacy law by failing to obtain consent. I think as of the time that this academic review was written, the case was still pending, so it would be very interesting to learn if indeed the courts have agreed with this argument of the competition authority. For antitrust remedies and data privacy, there may be some remedies which intended to restore competition but may have data privacy implications, such as compelling data access or compelling interoperability, specifically if that would involve personal data. Some of the ways, according to the academic review, whereby antitrust remedies relate to data privacy, compelling firms to disclose personal data in order to restore competition. But of course, these requirements should always have an opt-out mechanism for the data subjects, just in case that they do not want their personal data being transferred or accessed by another firm. The second one is reinforcing existing obligations to comply with data privacy law. Maybe in a case-to-case basis, there might be a need for merging firms, for example, to get new consent. Not always, but if it's appropriate and reasonable to the circumstances, it might be required. I think this scenario was particular on when Google acquired Fitbit, and then the EU required Google to get new consent from the EU users if they would allow or if they will grant or deny access to health data. The third one, requiring the merging firms to continue to hold data separately, or a data silo obligation, which limits the likely anti-competitive effects of data combination. Well, at the same time, it also has incidental data privacy benefits. For moving forward and to conclude the presentation, data protection and competition authorities cannot achieve their goals in isolation. There is a growing need and significant opportunities for multidisciplinary collaboration among competition and data protection authorities, which is essential, of course, to achieve effective and responsive regulation in the digital economy. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ivy. I think we have a few minutes to allow our distinguished panel to engage with the participants if there are questions on Slido that they'd like to address. So we will take a question on Slido and we'll invite the interested panelists to address it, and after which we can proceed with other questions that we've prepared for this morning. So the question that we have on Slido so far is, what weighs more, a person's right to privacy or an antitrust body's merger review right to obtain information? So I'm not sure which of our panelists, but I think perhaps Scott.
I can take a first stab at this one. First and foremost, a consumer's private information is paramount, and that should be protected in most instances. I'm not sure I actually see a conflict in terms of the antitrust capacity to investigate and get access to that data. Competition regulators around the world already have get access to very sensitive commercial information and very sensitive personal data that comes to us for our assessment. And there's a strong track record around the world of maintaining the confidentiality and privacy of that data. And so I think there's probably something in that question about the capacity to meet both aims. We can protect consumers' private data while still making sure regulators have the right information to make the decisions in the broader public interests, which ultimately benefit those consumers. And we do that through good and strong confidentiality regimes.
Just to add, also, if a competition authority, if PCC, for example, here in the Philippines would like to obtain information regarding in relation to a merger review, and that would involve personal data, the PCC will be considered as a personal information controller, having the mandate, having the duties and responsibilities under the Data Privacy Act. So there is really no need to balance the two, because they can coexist. PCC is expected in that instance to protect personal data that it will process.
Thank you, Ivy. I understand that in Malaysia, there isn't a merger review mandate. So I wonder, NASA, if you'd like to address the question from the perspective of an antitrust body's securing information pursuant to enforcement activities.
I think from my understandings with regard to merger control provisions, there is a procedures how to get confidential information, and we need to put in place so that we abide by any rules relating to confidential information such as data protection law. That's the only thing that I can answer.
Thanks very much, NASA. I'm not sure if there are other questions on Slido, but we have a few minutes. So I'd like to address a question for all of our panelists. One question that I'd like to address to all panelists, but I hope that they will take the perspective of their role or their agency's role, because I'd like to take advantage of having agencies with us here with different mandates. So my question is for the Competition Authority or the Competition and Consumer Protection Authority. What would you say are the data privacy protective mechanisms that can promote competition and consumer protection?
Thank you, Gwen. I think we've heard those touched on already a little bit from NASA and Ivy. The type of privacy protections that will enhance competition are at least two or threefold. First of all, anything that gives consumers the confidence and capacity to participate in markets is pro-competitive. So where we have transparency, informed consent, the confidence to know that what people say about the use of data is actually going to happen in practice, we'll see more confident consumer participation, and that has to lead to more competitive markets. So I think focusing on those elements is important. I think there's a bit of a thought in some people's minds that privacy means locking down data, and I think we're seeing privacy regimes around the world understand and embrace that that's not the regime, that giving consumers or individuals control over their data is one of the key principles. And where that applies and they have the capacity for data mobility, then that has to enhance both the switching between services and empowering consumers to come up with more competitive options to participate in the market. In addition to the privacy rules that Ivy mentioned that are going in that path, a number of jurisdictions around the world are picking up data mobility mechanisms. The UK has open banking in Australia. We're moving ahead with a consumer data right that is starting in financial services, moving to energy, telecommunications, and more broadly, to give consumers that capacity to have control over their data and use it in a competitive way.
Thank you, Scott. NASA?
Okay, so I have not enough study how consumer protection law can deal with the issue of privacy. But if you can recall my presentation just now, this is about unfair terms and conditions. So when you talk about unfair term and condition, it can also be handled by these three authorities, by consumer authorities, basically consumer authorities at the ministry body, and also data protection authorities and competition law. So the only difference is that, as I mentioned before, for competition law, there must be a strong relationship or interplay between market power, and wherein there is a lack of close substitute, then competition law can interfere in the area of data privacy. So as far as consumer is concerned, we have unfair contract terms provision in our consumer legislation. Unlike ACCC, it is an integrated approach, but in Malaysia it is a diverse approach. And I believe that these unfair terms and conditions can also be used to cover the issue of data privacy, but we don't have any case to support.
Thank you, NASA. Ivy, I wonder if you can also address the reverse. What competition laws, or what competition law, how competition law can contribute to the enforcement of data privacy protection?
So as of now, I'm not really aware if we have actual pending cases at the NPC which may involve a competition aspect. But as I mentioned earlier, maybe we could explore more on considering data privacy as in your merger reviews, in your abuse of dominance cases, on whether or not data privacy can be a factor in such reviews. It could be considered as a quality in competition assessments. I'm not quite sure because there are maybe no price aspect, it might be difficult, but as a quality, it could be factored in a competition authority's reviews.
Thank you, Ivy. We just have a few minutes, and we have more questions on Slido. They're specifically addressed to Scott, so I wonder if Scott will be able to address at least the second question.
Thanks, Gwen. So the second question is, when bringing cases against companies for misuse of data, does the ACCC explicitly pray, or I presume that means plead, for data privacy remedies? Not directly is the answer. We will have an eye to what is the appropriate remedy from a privacy perspective, but we'll need to frame that in a consumer protection lens, having regard to the remedies available to us. But we do have a very strong relationship with our Privacy Commissioner, or the Information Commissioner in Australia, and therefore we tend to be informed about the type of remedies that will be aligned with privacy protection.
Thanks very much, Scott. I think that's all the time that we have for the second session, but I hope that within that period, we've been able to enrich our understanding on the interplay between competition law and privacy law. And I'd like to thank again our distinguished panel for their contributions to our discussion. Thank you very much, and a good day to everyone.
Enriching indeed. Thank you very much to our moderator, Ms. Gwen Gracia de Vera. May I ask our panelists to please step forward for a photo opportunity with our moderator. Another round of applause for our final panel. That's Mr. Scott Gregson, Dr. Nasaruddin Abdul Rahman, and representing Mr. Franklin Anthony M. Tabakin IV, we have Ms. Ivy Grace Villas Soto. Thank you very, very much. Keep smiling for the photos, please. And before we wrap up today's EAC, again, we'd like to invite everyone, please answer the evaluation forms by scanning the QR codes you see on your tables or in your project books. But now, may we invite our commissioner at the Philippine Competition Commission to please give the closing remarks. Here is Ms. Mara Victoria Esquerol. Good morning, Commissioner. What a day. Actually, it's already good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before we draw our conference to a close, please allow me, in behalf of the Philippine Competition Commission, to express our sincerest thanks to the esteemed speakers, moderators, participants, our honored guests from the private and public sector. Special mention is in order to our fellow organizer, the Japan Fair Trade Commission and the Asian Development Bank Institute. We know how busy everyone is, and we appreciate that you have all taken the time to join us today. To all the team members and staff who have worked tirelessly, some behind the scenes, while others more visible, maraming salamat sa inyo. Once again, you have delivered and made this event possible. Today, we explored the delicate interplay between competition policy and sustainability regulation, as well as the unavoidable interface between competition policy and privacy laws. We recognize that sustainability involves the convergence of so many facets, including environmental, economic, and social development, and it is bound to intersect with competition law. As countries all over the world continue to pursue the sustainability goals contained in the 2030 Agenda or the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we see that firms have started to shift towards greener production and more resource-efficient technologies. However, green technology is expensive, and often governments, especially in emerging economies, resort to incentives in order to entice business to adopt them. Relatedly, the pursuit for sustainability has also spurred increased cooperation among industry players, which can be viewed by some as a competition law compliance risk. while we recognize the need for green innovations and collaboration of some level among market players, competition regulators need to be ever more discerning to ensure that these sustainability initiatives do not undermine our competition policies. Admittedly, frictions will arise between competition law and the objectives of sustainable development, and efforts must be actively pursued to harmonize and reach an acceptable balance. Competition law and environmental regulation need not be at odds with one another. Rather, they are to play a complementary role in pursuit of sustainability. As we have seen today, this spectral conflict can be dispelled through clear guidelines that take into consideration pro-competitive principles in sustainability regulation and vice versa. Another important development that has much attention in competition policy is the shift to digital markets and its ever-growing presence in our economy. The proliferation of consumer data, its processing, from search engines, social media, online shopping, transportation, banking, health, and other sources has opened a myriad of competition and privacy concerns. In the digital market, data is king and kingkeeper as well. Those who possess the data have the power to predict and influence consumer behavior, giving rise to issues on transparency, self-preferencing, and market dominance. While privacy enforcers are focused on protecting the individual from unlawful data collection and processing, antitrust enforcement is focused on the role and effects of this data on competition. A little scratching on the surface is all that it's needed to see that privacy and competition enforcers share a common goal, that is to ensure the welfare of all, consumers and business alike. As digital markets and the availability of various kinds of data sets continue to grow and gain more prevalence, the need to ensure harmony and cooperation between competition policy and privacy law intensifies. Today, we have taken another step towards achieving that goal. To my mind, it is clear that a harmony between competition law and sustainability regulation, competition policy, and privacy law must be had. And from what I heard today, I am optimistic that it can be had. All it takes is some effort, a little bit of flexibility, and an equal desire among the regulators to achieve this goal. Again, our sincerest thanks to everyone that made this conference possible. Rather than drawing the 14th East Asian Conference on Competition and Policy to a conclusion, I will opt to say, see you all on the next East Asian Conference. Please enjoy lunch and the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Querol. Kindly remain on stage, ma'am, Commissioner. Please remain on stage because we will now have photo opportunities with the heads of agencies and the commissioners of our competition authority. Again, we would like to invite on stage all of the heads of agencies and our commissioners of the CAs. Thank you. Kindly join Commissioner Querol on stage for a group photo. And while we're having this group photo done, we would like to invite everyone to please answer your evaluation forms by scanning the QR codes on your tables. I believe it is this one. Thank you. If I may borrow. It's found at the center of your tables. Kindly scan the QR code and answer the evaluation form and then submit it at the Secretariat outside. Here's another treat. Hello. Here is another treat after lunch. If you would like to join the cultural tour today, there is a cultural tour happening today. Please be at the hotel lobby by 2:45 p.m. For our international delegates who would like to join the cultural tour, please be at the hotel lobby by 2:45 p.m. For now, you may now help yourselves to lunch, Situated outside the ballroom, we have the buffet set up. You may now help yourselves to lunch via the buffet set up outside the ballrooms. And then you can proceed back to your tables to enjoy our lunch. Also, watch out for the treat coming up during the lunch hour. We will be having a performance by Banda Kawayan Pilipinas. They will be here to entertain you during lunch. So again, thank you for the evaluation forms. Please submit it to the Secretariat. Don't forget our cultural tour happening at 2:45 p.m. Meet at the hotel lobby for that. And finally, thank you to our heads of agencies and commissioners of the CA. That ends our twin events, the 17th East Asia Top Officials Meeting on Competition Law and Policy, and the 14th East Asia Conference on Competition Law and Policy. We salute all of you, our delegates and participants. My name is Isa Litton. Have a good day. Mabuhay!